Hey guys, I'm Ryan. I'm one of the tutors in the Econ Tutoring Center today. So today I'm going to show you an example of a trade problem, but this time it's in a form that you might not have seen before. So always remember that the language we use may differ from your professors, so always check to be sure that what we're saying is the same as how your professor says it. Okay, so here's what might look like a pretty typical example here of a trade sort of comparative advantage problem, where the US and Mexico produce corn and wheat. But instead of having our output per time period, we have how many hours it takes them to produce a given number of units. So let's just fix it to 1 unit. Let's say that it takes the US 20 hours to produce 1 unit of corn, whatever a unit of corn is, and it takes Mexico 30 hours to produce 1 unit of corn. So this is unconventional in the sense that now the US has a lower number here, but they actually do have the absolute advantage, right? Because it takes them less time to produce that 1 unit of corn, and similar in wheat. So I'm going to show you a trick really quick to kind of convert this to what I think is a form that's a little bit easier to use, where we say let's fix the amount of time that they have to 1 hour. So then we're going to kind of convert this from hours into units per hour, right? So then it's still going to be the US on this axis and Mexico there, and we'll still have corn and wheat, right, in the US and Mexico. But now let's say if we fix it to 1 hour, then in 1 hour, if it takes them 20 hours to produce 1 unit of corn, then in 1 hour they can produce 1/20 units of corn. Right, now we're in units of output rather than hours, and it's going to take them, in 1 hour they can produce 1/15 unit of wheat, 1/30th unit of corn, and 1/20th unit of wheat. So again, we can still see that when we're in product that the US has an absolute advantage in both, because in 1 hour they produce 1/20th, which is bigger than 1/30th, and they produce 1/15th, which is bigger than 1/20th. The US has the absolute advantage in both goods. Now if we want to kind of compare and try and find who has the comparative advantage in one good, because remember the US isn't going to have the comparative advantage in both goods, this is a much easier form to work with. So I say, okay, well in 1 hour the US can produce 1/20th corn, I'm going to use corn US, or they can produce, also in 1 hour, they can produce 1/15th wheat US, right? Then we always want to find out, well, what's the opportunity cost of producing 1 corn? Well then, if I multiply both sides by 20 here, I'm going to get that 1 corn in the US is equal to 20/15, which is 4/3 wheat in the US, right? That's approximately, 1.33. So we can do the same thing and try and see, how much it costs for 1 corn in Mexico. So we'll do the same thing here. I'll have 1/30th. Remember, in 1 hour they can produce 1/30th corn, and I'll call that Mexico. Or they could produce 1/20th wheat, Mexico, right? And again, if I multiply over, I'm going to get that 1 corn in Mexico is equal to 3/2, 30/20 wheat in Mexico. Okay, so who has the lower cost then of producing 1 corn? And that's how we can determine who has the comparative advantage. So every time the US produces 1 corn, they give up 4/3, so like 1.33 wheat, right? And every time the Mexico produces 1 corn, they give up 3/2, which is 1.5. So 1.5 wheat. So obviously the US gives up less every time they produce a corn. So the US is going to have the comparative advantage in corn. But then let's look what happens when we flip this the other way around and we solve for 1 wheat. So we already said that the US has the comparative advantage in corn. So comparative advantage in corn we know is the US. I guess I'll write it here like this. And now we're going to try and find who has the comparative advantage in wheat. Alright, so I'm going to flip this back around and now try and solve, instead of solving for 1 corn, I'm going to try and solve for 1 wheat. So this time I'm going to multiply both sides by 15. So I'm going to get 15 over 20, right, which is 3/4. 3/4 corn in the US is equal to 1 wheat in the US. Here I can do the same thing. I'm going to get that 1 wheat in Mexico is equal to 20 over 30 corn in Mexico. So 2/3. So 2/3 corn in Mexico is equal to 1 wheat in Mexico. And now notice we have the opposite inequality, right? So 2/3 is equal to approximately 0.66. 3/4 is equal to 0.75. So every time that Mexico produces 1 wheat, they only give up 0.66 corn, whereas the US gives up 0.75. So we know that actually Mexico has the comparative advantage in wheat. So this is going to be Mexico, if this little description here makes any sense. So the idea is that when you have these hours, it makes the most sense, I think, to convert to units per hour rather than hours to try and decide who has the comparative advantage and what. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have any more questions, come into the Econ Tutoring Center.